First, I'd like to thank our patrons of Tone and our first featured patron band. Check out Tier Keeper. Great band. I'm so glad the first featured band is good. So check out the description for a link to Tier Keeper and also a link to see your band on Circle of Tone featured. It's basically Patreon for $25 a month, and I'll play a clip of your music. Hey all, welcome to Circle of Tone. I used this same setup from this mystery amp Faith No More's Gould used on the Real Thing album. And on We Care A Lot, spans a lot of his albums, right, with this one bass amp. So here's an interesting thing, interesting to me anyway. The original bass has this really trashy reverb on it. And I couldn't recreate it with VST reverbs, and I've got quite a few reverbs, so I couldn't get the decay. Because I was playing so loud, even though my camera has an internal limiter, I was still blowing the shit out of it. So it's clipping on the actual camera. When I blend that trashy room, even though it's overloading, even though it sounds like trash, it actually gets a bit closer to the original. It's pretty funny. This is the bass without. This is the bass with about 20% of the room. And this is the room. Nasty, nasty, nasty. And there's obviously an external reverb, some room reverb, and a gate on the bass. So it might even be manually gated. Who knows? So fun fact, the TV on the radio, I used exactly the same mic position, settings, cabinets on the guitars as I did on the bass. I didn't even change anything. I just thought, what does my distortion pedal, my quad damage distortion pedal sound like with a Telecaster and a P90 Gibson style guitar through the bass rig? We have what the producer thought was a guitar amp. Okay, he was mistaken. It was actually a Peavey Mark IV bass amp, of old vintage solid state bass head. All right, he probably got it confused with the Mesa Boogie Mark IV because that is a guitar amp. So what's the big deal? Peter Steele from Type O Negative used this amp. Steve Severin from Suzie and the Banshees used this amp. The bass player for Nuclear Assault used this amp. We are talking seminal 80s, early 90s stuff coming from this amp. And it was the flagship. And I bought the flagship from Peavey for $100. It's got 2 channels. Ooh, 2 channels. Not so fast. 2 channels that with the foot switch you can combine. I have combined channels in the past and something's always off. It almost feels like it's in phase or something weird is going on and it just doesn't blend well. This blends seamlessly, like absolute, okay, I'm getting, if I turn this one up and I lower the high end, I can completely hear it in the whole spectrum, okay? And I also get the clarity of the first channel that I have. So you can really mix and match. Not only that, so you can have 2 channels on simultaneously, louder, okay? Different EQs, okay, on both. So you can like gain stage. Each separate channel has its own send and return. How's it called? You pedal freaks are going to like that. Send and return on each channel that you can run simultaneously if need be. On channel 1, you can have your delays. And then on channel 2, because you know how much distortions don't play well with delays, you can maybe put a preamp in there. Oh yeah, it has preamp in and preamp out. Oh yeah, it has crossover, sub, highs and lows. So you can take that crossover into the subs of the whole damn venue. That is some options, and it's not option paralysis because it's pretty simple. Oh, I forgot to mention, it also has a graphic EQ you can switch on or off with the foot switch. So if you up everything on the EQ, it just usually just ups the volume, and this does because I tested it. So you could, if you got a bass solo, you can just hit that EQ on, and all of a sudden, or guitar solo, you've got an extra boost. If they brought that out with a tube power section, the solid state power section is about as good as it gets. The thing is heavy as shit, so it's got good iron in there, and it's got also good cooling. It's got the huge fan cooling fins on the back, and it's built like a tank because it's still 100% working. Slightly scratchy pot. One pot is slightly scratchy. I could clean that. The thing is a goddamn tank. Back in the day, and Peter Steele also used this as well, was a Peavey cabinet, 2 18-inch speakers in it, and 10-inch speaker. So you get the best of both worlds. You get the nice percussive, clanky 10s, and then you get the sub-harmonic, like chest thump of the 18s. Okay, so I couldn't really get close. I actually did get close, but I didn't get spot on because I used a 15-inch speaker, a 2x15, and a 1x12 speaker. So I actually used like a $150 cabinet with it, the Seismic 2x15. I highly recommend those for bass. You might want to mix in 10s with it if you're into clarity. And then I used a Mesa Boogie 1x12 with a Black Shadow in it. Black Shadows are really versatile. Generally dark for guitar, and I still like dark. I'm good with dark. But for bass, it just has a good pop on it, you know? And you can't blow these things. You can't blow Black Shadows. I've never seen one blow. And rumors are that he also used a tube screamer during this era. And the producer for We Care A Lot era said that it was close mic'd, and also used a lot of compression. And he used the DBX 166 on when he did the vocals. So I presume he might have used that as well, because he did say that he was big on compression back in the day. So he would have either used whatever studio compression they had at the time. Oh, speaking of time, the whole album for We Care A Lot with Chuck Mosley on vocals took them 6 days. It was 2 long weekends, 6 days to record the entire album, including the smash hit We Care A Lot. How cool is that? And what bass did he use? Back then, he used, on recommendation from Cliff Burton, because they were boys, actually Big Jim Martin was best friends with Cliff Burton. And Cliff Burton was using the Araya Pro 2 bass back in the day. So that's what Billy Gould was using on this era, also on the Real Thing era. Sometimes with the Tube Screamer for drive, and also with the 2x18 and with the 10-inch speakers, and the Peavey Mark IV was the main setup. And actually, when they went on to do the Real Thing, like Epic and Fall Into Pieces, stuff like that, they actually had the bass rig set up in a hallway. So they had a little bit of like a narrower room than a big open room. They also put a Countryman DI, which is a famous DI. So they also went into the board as well, just to give it a bit of extra tweaking. And that is something that I could have done on my version, but I didn't end up doing it. I just went with the two mics. I used a bass drum mic on the 2x15s, and I used an SM57 about a few inches away from center on the 1x12. So that's how I got that. So how versatile is that amp? I didn't even mention everything on the Mark IV. It also has, high and low inputs for if you have passive or active bass. I actually swap them around. If I have a passive bass, sometimes I put it in the active so I can turn up the volume a little bit more to see what happens, because you never know what happens with the gain staging. And if I do have a really high output pickup, I did use, let me grab the bass I used. Let me yoink it real quick. This is Era. The closest thing I had that's Era specific, but it does have active pickups in it. And it is a Fernandez bass. So you can see it's got the P-style, jazz-style mix of its own brand. They're not EMGs. They are their own brand of Fernandez active. It's got a brass block with the rollers. I do not like rollers. I prefer the sharper bridge because rollers tend to deaden things a little bit. But apart from that, this bass is awesome. It's got an adjustable nut so you can lower it and raise it. And it is a beast. I love this guitar. It feels so great. Oh, sorry. Could you hear me? I'll up the volume on that. And the funny thing is, if you don't know, I've already done Faith No More on the guitar side of it with Big Jim Martin. And I learned how to slap bass to play epic, only to find out, luckily, before I because I actually recorded it with slap. Before I put the video on, I did more research and realized I used a pick on that. So I learned how to slap bass for nothing, so it's good now that I get to use it in this one. My thumb's killing me from, because you're supposed to build up calluses and everything. I gotta learn a bit of the pop-in as well, so that'll be another day. Isn't that cold, in tune? I haven't played it for a week. This thing is and funnily enough, on that subject, speaking of in tune, after being in a cold and warming basement, depending on the time of day, it's actually pretty consistent down here. Consistently fucking cold. Can you see my nips? You might be able to see my nips. So if you like what you see, get on my Patreon. And thanks to my patrons of Tone. I have no patrons recently, only because I did a video today. So give them a chance, right? But Richard P. and Co., thanks. Speaking of hot and cold basses, Billy changed basses because of the issues he was having with the Araya Pros. Now, if you're in an air-conditioned studio, Araya Pros are amazing. But if you go from a cold room to a hot stage, the neck's going to do this. If you go from a flight case, bottom of a plane, and then out into the Florida sun, the neck's going to do this. So it constantly goes out of tune, and all of a sudden you say, why are my frets buzzing? It's because your fucking neck is bowing. So there's that issue, So the Fernandez, it didn't do that, the Fernandez. Now, I did actually buy a vintage badass brass block bridge for this to get around the roller issue. But it's in such perfect condition. I'm like, do I butcher this beautiful bass to mod it when it's completely stock and works great? It sounds great. It sounds good, right? So even though I call it the 5%, when I upgrade things, say if I upgrade to a pure tone jack, internal wire, expensive, good cables, all right? I call it the 5%. It's a 5% jump every time. So it's not night and day. Like you upgrade your strings, it's like it's a 7%, something like that. So what happens is when you do a lot of good things in the signal, then you get the night and day stuff. So I obsess down to the power cables that I use, okay? I shit you not, okay? I have to hear it to believe it, but I've done enough research to know just the power supply. I don't care what the quality of power that is coming into your house. You think, oh, what about the cables internally of your house? How can one little stretch matter? It's a bottleneck, my friends. And it's also, it can act like an antennae for buzzing and all sorts of crosstalk, and it can mess up. Say if you have your guitar cables lying over it that are close within proximity, it's all about just the quality of the copper, the quality of the connectivity. Every single, I'm getting yay, bitch, you wanted to get nerdy? Here we go, bro. There are cheap cables that are good. They're getting a lot better. And then there are expensive cables which are bad. Okay, so it's not about the price. It really is about the construction. The shielding is huge. Because you'd be surprised of how much, like I use Evidence audio cables, and I use pure tone ends on my jacks. And I use pure tone barrel jacks too. So it's like every link of the chain, even the solder matters. If you have thousands of connections in there, and you use a solder that has better capacitance, and then it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Like when I come to the end of my nerd journey, I'm like, some of the shittiest guitar tones are some of the best. Buzzing and all. You can't hear anything when everything's playing. So it doesn't matter. Just because I went down the swapping out preamp tubes and different power tubes, which is surprisingly a little issue, but like it's the 5% I keep talking about. And Tonewood is a lot of bullshit in Tonewood. When it comes to actual Tonewood, it is a thing, only because 80% of the time I play unplugged. So different woods are going to sound different when you're playing unplugged. I'm playing an electric guitar in front of the TV, and some of them resonate better if it's more solid. So because I've made guitars out of pine, all right, and that pine guitar, because it isn't as solid, there isn't as much mass, it's not going to sustain as much because the body will resonate. You don't want resonation in a guitar. You want complete blocks of solidity, because it's the anchor point where the string meets the metal, meets the nut, meets the tuners. If everything is really jammed into something solid, it's going to sustain more. So is that Tonewood? Is sustained tone? Yeah. So, and again, it's that 5%. It's not night and day. It's just really, it's more, it's not tone, it's more physics, Because if the body is vibrating and the string is vibrating, that vibration is going to take away from that power. If it's solid, that power is going to go on a little bit longer, like a skipping rope, because that's what a string does. It goes round and round. Okay, come here for the good shit, right? And I'm here to say that Tonewood does not matter, and it certainly does not matter. Look at me, Gibson. All right, with your fucking bullshit. It certainly does not matter when it comes to stripping the world of ebony and rosewood and the poachers that you have in your back pocket. This is a joke. That get your rosewood. A lot of it isn't rosewood, but let's pretend, huh? I actually deleted a video on why I sold all my Gibsons and replaced them with Yamahas. I'm going on a fucking... Let's get back on track. Let's get back on track. I said I was going to talk about gear. Technically, I am. I'm talking about what makes a good instrument. And funnily enough, my Yamaha, speaking of crying about the forest, my Yamaha that I replaced them with has a ivory nut from elephant tusk. So riddle me that, hippie. So Peavey. Dude, made in America, vintage. I got it for $100, and it sounds like that. Bitch, come on. Come at me, Peavey. Call me. Let's talk about this. Let's put a tube power section in this bitch. We can call it the Invictus 5 or whatever. So yeah, basically a lot of tone is just capacitance, and the choices that you make between the energy coming from your strings all the way through speaker cables and guitar cables and the connection between the switch and this and that and the other. It's like all little bits degrade the signal, and it ends up sounding bad, like this. Did you know before Chuck that Courtney Love was the singer of Faith No More? We Care a Lot did make some noise for Faith No More, but then even after the real thing came out, including Epic, hadn't been released as a video yet, because it's like 8 months after the release, the album flopped. The real thing flopped for Faith No More. It was only after 8 months, and the record label just said, okay, what are we going to do with this band? I guess we'll throw some more money at them. We'll do one more video and see if it works. Epic came out and they went, whoo. I think Epic had come out, but it hadn't been distributed much yet. And they were on tour with opening for Voivod. Opening. And who was on after them? Actually, I think Voivod headlined, because it was in Canada. But Soundgarden were after Faith No More. What I would pay to see that gig. Now, I'd pay Ticketmaster prices. Speaking of Ticketmaster, I warned you guys. You got the $500 tickets to go see Metallica. I warned you. So like 8 years ago, I did a video on Ticketmaster and why their monopoly is going to end up skyrocketing the prices. It seemed obvious even back then, but I went back to the issue with lobbyists practically owning most of the stock in Ticketmaster. So you had somebody running for president, Mitt Romney, corporatist rhino, had lots. He still gets money from the finance companies that were backing Ticketmaster. Clear Channel Networks, now iHeartRadio, now iHeartMedia. These companies are thick as thieves. And I told you guys, and now you have families going bankrupt because Taylor Swift come to town. Does your wife like Taylor Swift, or does your daughters like Taylor Swift? If they do, tell them to come into the room now. My wife is a Swiftie. All right, we live in Swift County. Her and her friend entered a competition, and they won good tickets to see Taylor Swift in Florida. How's that? Free, baby. So my wife got to see Taylor Swift on that big tour for free. You can go away now. Just like think about that, of how much you probably paid to go see Taylor Swift. If you're new here, there's a much longer video on Faith No More where I go into the dynamics of the Jim Martin era and what I think went wrong and what went right with Mike Patton. My thumbnail is a little bit bait and switchy, but it's not a rage bait. I do 100% believe when you stack up Mike Patton's talent versus his body of work outside of Faith No More, I don't think he's reached his potential of what he could have been as a singer when he's going down the avant-garde noise, making turkey gobble noises and zombie snarls and all that type of stuff, which is so played out. And I wished that he'd made better use of his voice instead of just being like this anti-singer, where he's either taking the piss with crooning or he's just squealing like a pig for 8 minutes on stage doing a solo. I challenge you. I'm going to put it in the description. I challenge you to listen to that Mike Patton performance. All right, he went up his own ass. Let's put it that way. And is he trolling? Like, why are you trolling your fans? Why are you putting them through that? If they're paying $30 to go see you, and you're putting them through that. Oh yeah, by the way, I've done Suzie and the Banshees. I mentioned Steve Severin. I'll put that in the description too. You can check that out. It's one of my favorite ones. It's the John McGeoch era, where I do Spellbound by Suzie and the Banshees. What a song. That with Budgie and Severin and McGeoch together, that trio playing behind Suzie, see, who's just a goddess. That's what I'm talking about. And what did I just say? People, members of a band, here he goes, guys, guitar nerds. Get away from easy drummer. Get away from snap to a grid. Get away. You have to start mixing individuals and writing together. It's the only way. You can track modern rock and metal going completely downhill with, you can invert with Pro Tools, interest from the public. Down, down, down. You got to get with people, interest in people. Like, how interesting was it to even look at the guys in Epic, with how eclectic they all looked, how weird they all looked. That wasn't just a faceless modern metal band that all looked the same. They all look like me with, just all dressed in black, with long hair. All right, chaps, have a good one. Please like, subscribe, comment. I'll see you in the comments. I do respond to nearly all of them. I read all of them. Good and bad. Some are constructive, and some I like to mess with because it's fun. I think my favorite is when somebody says, "Oh, I'm sorry, but it sounds nothing like blah, blah, blah." I'm like, apology accepted. It's one of my favorites. All right, boys, I'll see you next time. Suggest any bands that you'd like me to cover, including Fat Strings Friday, which I never do on a Friday. I just put them out these days when it comes to the bass. So if you want to hear the Peavey Mark IV, it's practically been in all my recent videos. I did it in the recent Typo Negative video. I did it in the recent Faith No More video. I did it in the TV on the radio video. And now you've heard it again today. So I'm getting my money's worth out of that $100. Even putting the guitars through that bitch. Have a good one, guys. See you next time. Circle of Tone.